Hey everybody, welcome back to Journey to VR, where we're going to continue working on our AR shoe configurer. If you remember, we were trying to build a demo that basically is going to allow me to configure a sneaker in AR, and instead of having those changes just pop on, we want to have little construction workers essentially triggering the changes to that shoe. So we need to work with a lot of character animation that we've been setting up inside of Maya. And so far, we've learned how to get that data into Unity, but what we haven't done is got it actually playing back in the engine and learned how to build basic trigger systems. And that's what we're going to be going over today. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. All right, so here we are inside of Unity, and this is basically where we left off in the last demo, where we've brought in our environment, we've got our little dude brought in there, and then on top of that guy, we've loaded up a couple of animation clips. So we've got our idle clip, which starts with our guy in the T-pose and his arms kind of drop down. And then we've got a second clip of him walking through and doing some hitting motion. So if we kind of play this one back, you can see that's the hit that we want to get. So ultimately, this is what we're going to build into a little trigger system that plays back in the actual game or in the actual player. So the first thing we'll do is we'll drag and drop our little dude into our environment. And if we play this this back in the engine, you'll notice that obviously there's no animation that's being played back through the actual engine. And that's because we haven't set up an animation controller yet that tells the engine which clips to use when and where. So that's really what we're going to be building today. So let's hop in here. And the first thing we want to do is create that animation controller. So we'll just right click in our project window, say create, and we'll tell it to create a new animation controller, and we'll just give this a name that's meaningful to me, like DTO. And with that done, what we need to do is make a relationship between this controller and our little dude. So you can highlight the dude in your hierarchy, and you could either use the little browse window to go out and grab the DTO controller that we just made, or you could just literally drag and drop it on top of there, and it will make that connection for you. So with that done, if we double click on this controller now, you'll see that there's really no animation clips that have been brought in here. So what we want to do is we want to jump into our clips and just grab both of these guys and drag them, drop them in here. So you'll notice that one of those clips has been hooked up into this guy, and it is our animation clip 1. If we jump back to our scene and we hit play on that, you'll remember that animation clip 1 was basically my guy doing his little hit here, which is kind of cool. So that's great that we now have animation playing back in the engine, but it's not the idle clip that we want to start with. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this animator window, and we'll just kind of dock it over here just so it's a little easier to see. We're going to change our default state. So we're going to say make this layer our default state. So now if we play it back, obviously you can see our little guy goes through here, his arms are in the T-pose, he drops down, it plays a clip one time, and then it just sort of stops, which is cool, but not really what we want. We want it to kind of sit there and loop over and over. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into that idle clip, and we're going to adjust its range here. So we're going to say, I don't want this idle clip, which we're now looking at right here, to start at 0 to 142. I just want to trim that guy back to where his arms are kind of hanging down by his side, sort of right like that. Looks pretty cool. So that will be our start point, and I want to tell it to loop, so we'll turn that loop on, and you just need to scroll down here and make sure you hit apply. So with that done, now if we highlight our character here and we hit play, you'll notice by having it highlighted over here in the hierarchy, I get a little time slider kind of whipping through there as it's kind of passing through this guy, and that looks pretty cool. Now obviously I should clean up that loop inside of Maya and make sure that it loops nicely and kind of transitions back and forth to itself cleanly, but for today, this is good enough. So we've got our guy sort of hanging out doing his idle loop. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to have this other animation clip get triggered. We want that animation of him doing his hit to occur when I press a key on the keyboard. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to tie this into our animation here in our base layer, and we're going to use a little bit of scripting to trigger that event. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this animation clip is looped back into the idle clip. So if you click on it with your right mouse button, you can say make transition. So I'm going to tell it that after it runs that hit clip, to transition back into the idle. So now that we've done that, the next thing that we need to do is get a little C# script in here to add in the code to trigger the keyboard event. So we'll just create a new C# script, and we'll call it DTO, and we'll drag and drop that guy also onto our character here. So now if we highlight our guy here, you can see that this script is going to also be associated with that, and we just need to add into this guy a little bit of code. It's not too much. So what we'll go in here and do is, the first thing we're going to do is create a new public statement, and it's going to be an animator. And we'll give it a name that's meaningful to me. So we'll just call it anim to keep things pretty simple. And then the next thing we want to do is basically tie this into, it's just a simple if statement. If I press a key on my keyboard, trigger this animation. So pretty straightforward. So we're going to say anim is equal to, and we're going to get the component for that guy. So we'll just say get component, not component, but a single component. And we'll link that into animator. Kind of close that guy off and just kind of do that. All right, so that looks about right. And then we got to do our little simple if statement down here. So we're going to come down here and we're going to do an if. So let's just tab in and do if. And it's going to be an input that we want to get. So input. And the input that we want to get is, and there's lots of different inputs that you can get. We're going to just do get key down. So we'll just do get on this guy. Let's do a dot get. And we want to do not button down, but get key down. So we'll do get key down. And then what key do I want to do? We'll just do 1. Actually, I got to quote that guy. And kind of close that dude off. And then we're going to basically say, all right, after we've done that, what do we want to do? Well, what we want to do is we want to tell it to, first of all, print something so I can see if it's actually done, done something. I always like to do a print in there just to keep things easy. So let's just go down here and do a print. And we'll tell it to print, I don't know. What are we going to say? We'll say hit. Why not? So we'll just kind of quote that guy. Hit. Not high. Hit. And with that done, then the next thing that we want to do is tell it to trigger the animation. So we'll do anim, and then we'll tell it to play. And you'll notice that when I hit that play, it gave me some tooltips. So basically what we want to do is tell it which clip do we want it to play. So for this example, let me just jump back here. It's going to be anim underscore clip 1. So we're going to tell it to play anim underscore clip 1. And then we needed to tell it a couple things like what layer do we want it to play. So if we just do, it tells you right here. So it's basically the string and then the layer. So we're going to do -1 for the base layer. And then we need to tell it where in time do we want it to play. And that's going to be also something like 0 frames. So we want it to start at 0 frames. So by changing this number right here, you can adjust where in that clip range is it going to trip, the normalized time from 0 to 1. So obviously if you did like 0.5, it would be halfway through the clip. So we're good with all that the way it is. So we'll just kind of do that and kind of end our thing and then just kind of come down here and close this guy off. And with that done, here, I'll just go up here and we'll just do that, clean it up a little bit so we can save this guy out. So we jump back into Unity here and bring our console up. Oh, and we have to make sure that we hit play with this guy highlighted so we can see our little clips kind of playing back here. So here's our little guy doing his idle, looping, looping, looping. I hit 1. You can see that it triggers my little print command down there in the console, and there goes this little hit. Now you'll notice that that hit obviously is translating our character forward, which isn't really what we want to have. So we're going to jump back into our project really quick here, and we're just going to trim back the effect of, I just want to have a couple of hits, those kind of punches there. So we'll jump back into our moves here. We'll go to clip 1, and I don't want that kind of end of that guy where he's doing all that kind of crazy stuff. We just want the couple hits here where he's kind of hanging out, and we'll just end with that one right there. That looks pretty good. And again, make sure you hit the apply button because it won't remember what the changes you've made until you hit the apply button. So if we play this back one more time, here's our little guy doing his thing, kind of doing his little idle thing. I hit my 1 key. It goes off, it triggers the little hit, and then it transitions back into the idle, which is super, super cool. So that's basically how we can set up a little trigger system inside of Unity to trigger some animation data that was brought in from Maya onto our little character here. Hopefully you guys are enjoying this. So thank you so much for taking the time to check this out. If you're watching this on Vimeo or on YouTube, make sure you go back to the area. On the area, I've been recording mini demos over the last year showing Maya, Max, and game engines doing cool things with VR and AR. We've also got some awesome written articles as well as some video-based interviews with our customers and thought leaders talking about what they think is super cool in the VR and AR space. So make sure you go check all that information out on the area. Cheers, everybody.